This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we'll show you how to go from employee truck driver to savvy business owner. And we'll do it together because we're starting our own trucking company, Haulin Assets, so you'll get a front row seat through the whole process. Together with some experts in the field, we'll teach you how to set up a business, buy a truck, get your DOT and MC numbers, get insurance, and a lot more. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, everybody. This is the Haulin Assets podcast, the inaugural episode. I am Craig, and over there, he is...
Chris.
Hello, Chris.
How's it going?
Not bad. I am super excited for this because this is going to be a podcast that many people will find valuable if they have asked themselves the same questions that I am asking myself. But we're going to get to that in just a moment. First, I want to remind everybody, if you are interested in show notes, if you hear some details or something here that you'd like more detail on, make sure you go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. That's sorry, you spell it. You're better at spelling than I am.
I'm a terrible speller. That's my mother's biggest disappointment in life is my inability to spell.
Let's see if I can do this better. HAULIN, no G.
No G.
All right, HaulinAssets.com, HaulinAssetsLLC.com.
That's it.
By the time we've made a dozen of these, I'm gonna be pro at saying that web address.
It might take a dozen, especially when we bring spelling into it.
Exactly. And also, if you want additional information on some of the stuff that we're going to be going over, you can also visit motorcarrierhq.com. So both of those are great resources. If you want specifically info that we're going to be talking about here on the podcast, though, the primary one that I would point you toward is HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Why is it called that? We're going to get there in just a moment. All right. Now, Chris, what are we doing here? Why are we sitting down in front of microphones telling people about what we're telling them about?
That's a great question, Craig. So basically, for the last decade, I've been helping people start and run trucking companies. And I've had this dream for the last 4 or 5 years that I've wanted to help more people achieve that goal and live out that dream. I love small business and want to be able to provide that for other people. So I started to think, how do we do that? And I think the best way to do that is to create a system for people to follow. That's why a lot of the times franchises are so successful, is because it's a prescribed system that people can follow. They follow these rules and they're not always going to be successful, but
it gives them the best chance.
It increases their chances a ton.
It's an interesting analogy because in this case, somebody starting a trucking company isn't franchising necessarily. I mean, certainly the clients you work with, they're not franchisees. And so this is a system, it's a template, but that template isn't necessarily going to be... not every single facet is applicable to every single situation, right? So people are going to be able to use this as a framework, but they're going to have to adapt, right?
Yeah, for sure. They're going to be able to do 90% of what we talk about, but they're going to have to figure out maybe that other 10%. And so the way that we're going to do this, and I can't think of a better way to do it, is we're going to put our money where our mouth is and actually start a trucking company, give everybody a front row seat into the entire process. We're going to run it just like we recommend to other people so that they can see it, they can live it, and they can follow it. You know, I've done this so many times with so many people over the years. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't, and we're going to teach people, we're going to show people the right way to do things, and we're also going to show them how to avoid the pitfalls that make it so they fail and they aren't successful. And, you know, starting and owning and running a trucking company isn't one of those things that is for everybody. And we want to be able to show the pros and cons, the good side, the difficult side, so that people can make a decision for themselves. Is this something I want to do? Is this the right thing for me? They'll be able to see it and they'll be able to make a good, educated decision and follow the system and hopefully be successful.
And that's a really interesting take on it because a lot of times I think somebody tuning into this would think, okay, they're going to try to convince me to do it. But I think it's more about showing people the actual nuts and bolts, the ins and outs of starting a business like this so that they can decide for themselves whether the answer is yes or no for them, right? Yeah. It's not necessarily going to be for everybody, but a lot of people who may not have thought that they could do it can do it. They just need a little detail, some help getting started, right?
Absolutely. I've owned my own businesses for 10 plus years now. It's been one of the best things in my life. I'd love to see more people do it. I'm passionate about small business. I'm a passionate entrepreneur, and I just want to be able to give other people the opportunity to do that. And you can, if you've got the right mentality, you can do it, and we can help you do it. We can show you how to do it. And that's the whole point of this.
Perfect. Well, I was telling you a little earlier about a time when my father came to visit, and he comes over. He had some excuse, bringing us some baked goods or something. But the real reason he was there, he sat me down at the kitchen table and he said, I've heard you talking about going back to school and getting a master's degree or something. And he says, don't do it. I said, what do you mean? He says, I think it's probably not for you. I want you to start a business. And if you start a business, I'm willing to help you seed it and get it started. I said, wow, that's really generous. Thanks, Dad. And he says, so what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And so what I want from you, Chris, is I want you to convince me that this is something that I could do. If because I am interested in starting a small business. And is this, is trucking something that I could get into? I want you to help me understand the ins and outs of it. We'll see if it's the right move for me as well as our listeners. I
think that's a great way to look at it. And just to elaborate a little bit on that, a lot of the stuff that we're going to get very specific into the trucking industry, but a lot of the stuff that I plan on covering as part of this podcast is going to be applicable in just about any industry out there. So, it could be valuable for all facets.
There you go. We're going to be talking today briefly about the top 5 questions that you really ought to be asking yourself. You don't necessarily need to have answers for all of them right away, but you at least need to have these questions in mind as you think about starting your own business. And so that's where I'm going to be. I'll be with all the rest of you on this. So, Chris, let's run through really quickly. We'll tell everybody what the 5 points are, and then we'll back up and get just a little bit into each of these. But I should tell people we're going to briefly talk about all 5 of these points, but all 5 of these will make appearances in future episodes. Each one of these will be its own episode. We're going to get really in-depth on some of this stuff. So not only are we going to say, you got to figure out where your money's coming from, but we're going to give you really specific tips on how to figure that sort of thing out, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is whether you should be going it alone or grabbing a partner for your venture, where your money's going to come from, can you get insurance and a down payment, do you have the right truck? I'm assuming that's going to be a big one. And then 5th, and maybe the most important, are you willing to do what it takes? And that one I am really intrigued by because it's so ominous when you say it out loud. Are you ready to do what it takes? But you're going to explain what that means. Let's back up a little bit, though, and go back to number 1. Number 1, go it alone or go with a partner. Tell me why this is the number 1 question that you've got.
Because you never know what you're going to run into. We get clients that come in our door all the time and want to go into business with a partner. And most of the businesses that I own, I've got partners with them. But a lot of people kind of go about it the wrong way and don't really think the process through very well. And the partnership turns into a disaster. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've had a partnership come in, get everything going. We help them get set up, and 6 months or a year down into the road, they decide they're going to part ways because it's just not working out. So I don't want to discourage anybody from starting a business or doing it with a partner, but I just want to make sure you set the foundation right to do that. And you know what you're getting into, you know what to look for, and you know what to think about when deciding am I better off just trying it on my own, or am I better off doing it with a partner?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you've got a quote here from Charles Koch, who says, my philosophy on partnerships is you need 3 things to have a good partnership. You need to share vision, values, and bring complementary capabilities, which is pretty much what you're talking about. What I understand from this is you are as smart as Charles Koch.
If you look at it net worth wise, I'm not even in the same ballpark.
All right. So is there anything else you want to talk about right now without going too much into depth about partnerships? Do you lean one way or the other? I mean, you say that most of your businesses have had partners. Is that kind of the way that you tend to push people into partnerships?
Not necessarily. It kind of depends. And I think a lot of the times, so with starting a small trucking company, it depends on what you want to do. If you're going to be an owner operator and you don't plan on growing more than 1 truck, typically one truck is not going to generate enough revenue to support two partners. If you want to grow to a 10 or 50 or 100 truck plus fleet, then having a partner may be very wise, because, working together, it's going to be easier to achieve that goal.
And is this a thing where you could change your mind down the road if you're an owner operator, you're a one truck outfit, and then down the road 5 years later you say, you know what, I do want to expand? Is it something where you can say, all right, I want to bring in a partner, or is it going to be too tough at that point?
No, it's usually pretty easy to make those changes. I mean, to pull a partner out of it, that's typically harder than it is to add somebody in. Typically adding a partner in is not very hard at all.
Very good. Well, let's move on to number 2 then. Where is the money going to come from? Well, this is a tough question, and I'm just going to let you go. I'm just going to ask you that. Where's the money coming from?
All right, that is a really good question. So, and that's something that's really critical in starting a business, is you've got to have some kind of capital, or at least some kind of access to capital. So, to kind of piggyback off the partnership conversation we've had, that may be one of the capabilities that another partner brings in. Maybe you're the driver, but you've got a buddy that's got capital, and working together, you each bring something to the table that's of value, and you can start a good partnership. So that's one way that you can get the startup capital that you might need if you don't personally have it. There's other methods to get that money as well. You may have some money in savings. If you do great, maybe you got an inheritance. This time of year, we're early in 2019, and it's tax time. People are filing their taxes, and we get a lot of clients this time of year that come in and use that tax return instead of go blowing it on a big flat screen TV. They're going to use that as part of the seed money into their
checking. It's like you're
company.
reading my mind. In my mind, 4 weeks from now, when that tax refund comes in, I'm going for the TV. I don't care what you say.
That's not. Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
No, I'm just joking. All right. So maybe you have savings, maybe you don't. But you also mentioned in our earlier conversations credit, and this could be maybe a tricky minefield for some people.
That's the very tricky piece. To make money, you've got to spend money. You've heard that a lot, and that's really the case. Going into credit or using credit to get into that, it's a tricky situation. It can be the right thing to do, but it can also get you into a lot of trouble. So you need to be super careful with it. There are in most locations, there are places out there that do what are called micro loans. So you're not using a credit card. It's not a super high interest rate. It is a legitimate business loan that will fund startups. When you're starting a company, it's really hard to get lenders from your traditional lenders like banks, but there are nonprofits. Utah's got a great one right here that I think, if I remember right, they'll loan up to $50,000 to a startup if you've got a good business plan and they feel like you've got a good plan and path towards becoming profitable and making money.
Nice. And we should maybe mention that is where we're broadcasting from. We record in the state of Utah, and so you'll have to check if you're in a different state what resources are available. But I'm guessing, Chris, you can help people with that.
Yeah, we can at least give some ideas. I've got another company that provides operating capital. We don't really lend to buying, helping people buy trucks or things like that. But a lot of the times, people will start their company and they've exhausted most of their money in purchasing the truck, purchasing insurance, and those other things, and then they don't have a whole lot of operating capital to really get them through that first 30 to 60 days, and that's where even one of my companies we can kind of help out with a little bit.
Oh, interesting. I actually didn't realize that. I just figured you'd point them to the right place in their state, but that's great if you can help people out.
There, a lot of the stuff that we do, we can help you out. If we can't help you out, we've got partnerships and resources who can. And one of the nice things about us is, if we can't help you out, we're going to tell you that, and we're going to put you in contact with good, reputable companies that we've vetted, that we know provide a valuable service and do so honestly and ethically. And so you're going to get pointed in the right direction to somebody that can really provide you value and help you out.
And that's got to be one of the most valuable services that you provide to somebody, is not only the stuff that you do, but helping understand the lay of the land and like you said, pointing them to reputable resources. Because I'm sure there's 1,001 places out there that are ready to fleece somebody. But there are also a lot of reputable places where people can go for this information or this help, right?
Yeah, we like to say there's a lot of snakes in the grass, and you just got to be careful of those guys. And there's a lot of people that are trying to prey on, somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, and we avoid those and can teach you how to avoid those. In the process of starting up a trucking company, you're going to get inundated with a lot of people soliciting you to provide you services, and sometimes it's really hard to know which ones are legitimate and which ones aren't, and we can help with that. Fantastic.
Well, before we get off of the funding point here, you also mentioned to me something that I forget to think about sometimes in my own. I do own a very, very small business, and this is something that I forget about all the time: co-mingling funds.
Yeah.
What was it that you wanted to talk about with that?
It's a big no-no, and it's one of those things that you see as a very common mistake when people first get started. So basically what co-mingling funds means is you can get a business set up, and then one of the first things you typically do after that is set up a bank account. And a lot of people, when they set up that bank account, they have the intention to use it specifically for the business, but then maybe they'll decide to go to Burger King and buy themselves a burger or something, and they start using that
business card.
Yeah, they pull out the business card and they start making what are considered personal expenses out of the business account, and that can get yourself into a lot of trouble for a lot of different ways. The IRS doesn't like it legally. The courts don't like it. It's one of those things that you hear about, the corporate veil that defense or prosecuting attorneys will try to use to show that you're treating your business not like a business, but you're just running it, personally, and you can lose protection on your assets. And so just one big word of advice as you're getting out there and getting started: do not commingle funds. Have that business bank account and only use it for business expenses. You may think it's innocent to, well, instead of just paying myself, I'll just pay my mortgage out of it, and then that's how I'll pay myself. Same thing. It's not. Don't do it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it's, again, these are points that we want to bring up as just top of mind. And so it's interesting to me that you thought of that as one of the things people need to keep in mind, is that as you're starting your business is not you. You need to separate yourself and the business in that financial way in order to protect yourself.
Yep.
So that's an interesting one that we will get into more detail with all of this stuff in future episodes of the show. Next up, your number 3 question: can you get insurance and a down payment? And when you were telling me about this one earlier, I never would have thought that this was such a big piece, but you were saying that this is something that trips up a lot of people who are just getting started on this process.
Between getting the insurance and making the down payment, that's probably the biggest stumbling block that guys get. If they are able to set up the business, they apply for their motor carrier authority and get their DOT number, get all those things done. The thing that prevents them from actually getting out on the road and being able to go is insurance. So there's a couple things that you need to consider. First and foremost is, can you actually get the insurance? So most insurance companies that provide insurance to startup trucking companies are going to require the driver to have had a CDL for at least 2 years.
Interesting. So this is maybe not a business that's going to be as easy to start if you haven't been working in the business for a while.
Correct.
I mean, unless you're the other side of that partnership that's providing funding and you've got somebody else who can do the driving for you.
Yeah, it's not completely unheard of. I mean, there are ways that you can come over or get over that stumbling block. Like, for instance, that might be a situation where it's good to have a partner, or maybe you just hire a driver. You're not going to be the driver. You're going to hire a driver to drive the truck for you. Doable, but it just makes things a little bit harder.
No, that makes sense. But you did say that there are some exceptions to this. Again, this is from a previous conversation that we've had. So expound on that for me.
Yeah, so there are some exceptions where you can go out and get insurance. You take for me for example. So I've never had a CDL. I just got my CDL 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations, by the way.
It's kind of a big deal. I had a ton of fun learning how to drive the truck. I've driven a lot of farm equipment in the past, but it's the first time really driving a full-blown 80,000 pound semi, and I loved it. But yeah, so in my situation, I'm old. I'm 40 years old.
Yeah, you're old.
I am old.
Yeah, you're old.
I'm 40 years old. I've got a clean driving record and I've got good credit. Those are three things that open a few doors for me, even though I haven't had a CDL, where I should still be able to get insurance.
Okay. Have you started that process yet?
I've talked to a few insurance agencies, and they're all telling me there's one insurance company that will write insurance for a guy like me. And so I'm confident I'm going to be able to get it. But that's the one thing that you got to be aware of. If you're under 30 years old, and really I think the number is closer to 35, 37, and you haven't had a CDL for 2 years, your options are super limited.
That reminds me of the idea of renting a car before I was 25.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You're a higher risk, and so insurance companies just they're not going to write insurance for you.
That makes complete sense. Well, let's get to question number 4, and this is something that may sound like a familiar experience because everybody's bought stuff, cars, houses, whatever. But buying a truck, I'm imagining this is a different beast altogether.
It is. It's a completely different beast. There's a lot of different things to think about and to consider. In the trucking world, you've got day cabs that don't have sleepers, and you've got different kinds of sleepers and different kind of trucks that can do different kind of things. And so, a lot of times we'll get a client that comes to us that already has, one type of truck, and but it's a truck that's really not going to work for what they're trying to do. And a lot of the times, it may be something as simple as, hey, this truck has been around for 13 years. It's got over 1 million miles on it. The engine's never been rebuilt. And chances are you're going to have a ton of maintenance issues with it. And you're not going to be able to be profitable because of all the expenses that are going to go in with it. You may be better off just to cut bait and switch onto something different.
And this is something that is that you're going through right now, right?
Yeah, I'm buying
you're
a
going
truck
through this process.
Yep. So I've talked to a lot of people about buying a truck. And one of the things that's kind of cool about me and not having had a whole lot of experience is I don't really have a brand loyalty. And it's funny, I've talked to 3 different people so far that I've had pretty extensive conversations with. And one says, I got to buy a Peterbilt. One says, I got to buy a Kenworth. And the other one's, I got to buy a Freightliner. So it's just like the Ford and Chevy debate. Everybody's got their opinion. I'm going to try and look at this more from a scientific standpoint. What is truly going to give me the best return on my investment? I'm a money guy. I'm a financial guy. And really the thing that's the most important to me is how I'm going to be able to make the most money.
And that's going to be, I'm going to love that particular episode because I'm going to be really interested in getting past that Ford and Chevy debate, with all this stuff. So very much looking forward to that. And the last question that we have here, number 5, like I said, maybe the most important, are you willing to do what it takes? Like I said, this sounds ominous, but what do you mean by that?
Entrepreneurship, owning your own business and doing your own thing is not for everybody. It's hard, especially that first year or two, while you're getting everything established is hard. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Oftentimes there's a lot of sacrifices you have to make to be able to kind of really jump into that realm and grow something that's going to be successful. And so you just have to be willing to know that you may be taking one step back to eventually be able to move 2 steps forward. And you have to be willing to do that. So that's really a big piece of that. And I've got a few things that we want to talk about a little bit that we can go a little bit more in detail with that.
One of the other things that you have said is that it's not just about you, right? This isn't when, if you are lucky enough to have a spouse or a long-term relationship and that person is, in it for the long haul, so to speak, with you. By the way, trucking puns are going to come fast and furious on this podcast. Just deal with it. But if you are lucky enough to be in that position, you're not the only one who's going to be affected by the business. And so it's not just you who has to have what it takes. It's your spouse, your significant other, your partner, whoever that person is in your life, that they need to be on board with it as well. Yeah.
If I've seen a lot of situations where, one person's fully on board and totally committed and the other person isn't, and it eventually wears on you and you just can't make it happen. both people have to be on board. I had to do the same thing with my wife when I decided I was going to do this. This is, like I said, I have been working on this, planning about it, thinking about it for 4 or 5 years. And I finally just decided to do it. And my wife and I, we had that sit down conversation and say, okay, well, this is what this is going to mean. That means, for weeks at a time, I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be away from home. We've got 4 kids, ages 8 to 14. And it's going to be hard on my wife. And so we had that pretty serious conversation and both became on board on it. And ultimately what she ended up saying was, I'm in the National Guard. I'm in the military. I've been deployed for a year, and she's got, this isn't going to be as bad as a deployment. We can do this.
If we can do that, we can do this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, that makes total sense. And that's really why I'm so excited about what we're doing here, is because you've been assisting people in this process for years, but now you're finally going through it yourself. And I love this idea of the personal experience and not just coming down from on high and saying, here is what you need to know, but really you're in the trenches with everybody else.
Yeah. I'm excited. I want to be able to show that I can do it. I want to be able to show other people how to do it. And, it's still a risk for me. It's still, I still have those same nervous thoughts that I've had when I've started other businesses. And so I know what everybody's going through, and it's going to be fun to be able to bring that out and see that as this whole process continues on down the road.
Absolutely. And these are the top 5 questions, but there are a lot more things to go over after that. I mean, we're going to be talking about your DOT and motor carrier stuff, getting all your ducks in a row with the Department of Transportation. Not a simple thing to do.
No,
not necessarily painless.
Never's easy.
We're going to be talking about not just buying the right truck, but also the right trailer, making sure that you're set up on both ends of that, how to get loads. That is something that people may not consider if they've just had loads assigned to them. Right now, you've got to go get your own.
You've got to be able to get those loads and keep the wheels turning, or things just aren't going to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what other things are we going to be looking at?
One of the things early on that we'll look at too is we'll talk about business structure. So a lot of this stuff at the beginning is going to be kind of boring. The boring legal stuff, boring but incredibly important. There's a lot of different ways you can set up a business. You've heard LLCs, you've heard corporations, you've heard sole proprietorships. We're going to talk with attorneys and tax people on those things and try to give everybody a decent idea of what's the right path for them. And what questions to ask your attorney, what questions to ask your accountant, and to make sure you're getting things set up the way that you want to get it set up.
So now that we've got the stage set, why don't you tell me just a little bit more, and tell everybody a little bit more about yourself, why it is that you are doing this, why anybody should care about your opinions on this, quite frankly. To put it bluntly, Chris, sell me on it.
All right. Well, here's kind of what I think. So I feel like I've got the perfect mix of background to really make this work. I've got some blue collar roots in me. I grew up working on my grandpa's farm. Like in the summertime, you talk about sacrifices. In the summer when I was a kid going through high school, instead of having the fun summers that most of my friends were. I mean, these were fun summers, a different kind of fun. But I'd go live with my grandparents on my grandpa's dairy farm and move pipe, irrigation pipe. I would, swath hay, bale hay, move, all that kind of stuff, working 80-hour weeks all summer long. And so I understand that hard work, that culture that it takes to be a good, successful truck driver. But then, after that time period in my life, I went on, I got a college degree. I've got a degree in business with an emphasis in finance. I've, over the last 10 years, started 4 successful companies that are all still running and all still doing well. I've invested a lot in real estate. So I really understand that financial side. So I feel like more so than most people, I've got that unique perspective where I understand the sweat and the blood that it takes to start a business like a trucking company. But I also understand the finance side, the business side, more so what you would call the white collar piece of it. I understand both those. We're going to mesh them together in this podcast and make something, show people how to be successful at owning, running, and being part of a good, successful trucking company.
If I'm somebody who has one background or the other, let's say, because I similarly to you, I kind of grew up around farming. My father was a farmer up in eastern Idaho when he was a kid, and so we spent a lot of summers doing some work up there as well. And so I kind of hear that. And if, let's say, I've got that background, or maybe I've been in trucking for a while, and I don't want to learn all the white collar stuff. I don't care about numbers and finances and spreadsheets and all that stuff. What do you say to somebody like that?
You know, if somebody's willing to work hard, typically, even in the trucking industry, as long as they've got some minor proficiencies in those areas, they can still be successful. They may not be able to grow their business to a 100 truck fleet. And a lot of guys, that's not what they want. They just want more control over their own destiny. There's nothing wrong with being a one truck independent owner operator. And we're going to show people how to do that, even if they don't want to get more into that numbers. But we've also can show them how to build a team that will take care of that part of the business for them, so they don't have to, so they can do what they enjoy. I remember a conversation a long time ago with one of the Tyler that works for me, and you'll hear him later on in another episode. But the client, Tyler, was trying to email him something, I think, or trying to get him to pull something up on a computer, and they were just having a really hard time. And then finally the guy comes back and asks, "So is this something you got to do on a computer?" And Tyler's like, "Well, yeah." And the guy is all, "If it don't use diesel, I don't do it." And so, and that guy was able to be successful in his trucking company. And so
that is literally what I aspire to be. That I aspire to be that man. That's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like the stage is set. We're ready to rock and roll on these episodes for this podcast. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. Hopefully you out there listening have found already some value in just those questions, just those top of mind questions. But keep those in mind, because we're going to be diving into those each individually. They're all going to get their own separate episode. And frankly, they're all probably going to be longer than this, because there's a lot to go into. I mean, talk about finances. How much is it going to cost to start this business? There are questions that we're going to have to really dive into. So
we'll go over those questions. We'll provide some tools to help out with some of that stuff, make it easy. And I'm excited.
Perfect.
That's all I can say.
Awesome, Chris. Well, I'll just remind everybody once again, if you are interested in some more details and show notes with any of these episodes that we go over, head to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. No G. HaulinAssetsLLC.com. And you can also go to MotorCarrierHQ.com for some more info. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you on episode 2, where we're going to be talking about your business structure, if I'm not mistaken.
That's episode 2.
Fantastic. Let's do it. All right, Chris, let's break. I'll see you next time.
All right. See you later.